Real professional move there, starting the podcast without the mic. But Ingram Smith and Bud Elliott back again for another episode of the Nolecast. Forgive us as we're kind of doing this in a different location this morning. But as always, want to get you guys out a podcast that is timely. And we'll spend a little bit of time looking back at the NC State game and kind of giving our final thoughts on that. And we have a couple listener questions to talk about, some recruiting conversation. This won't be the longest Snowcast, but excited to do it as always, and excited to be able to pair with good people like Louisiana Hot Sauce and Tarpon Cellars. Tarpon Cellars is a fantastic sponsor for us and a great option for you if you're looking for any kind of last-minute holiday gifts. Really some of the better red wines that are out there, and a fantastic, supporting cast of options. So tarponcellars.com, coupon code Nolecast, 20% off. And Bud, let's jump into it.
Yeah, man. Where do you want to start tonight? I'm glad we were able to do this. And I said tonight, but it's actually this morning. There's just a lot of notes I took. I got a chance to rewatch the full NC State game, and if you had told me that they definitely weren't going to have Jordan, and they didn't have that many guys at practice, I don't know that a different result should have been expected. And, this is not a beat your chest moment, but we both predicted losses. And I don't know. If you play that game a bunch of times under those circumstances, I'm a little bit hard-pressed to find a whole lot of those outcomes. You played it like 100 times. I don't know how many you really win.
Yeah,
I think there's quite a few more that you lose by more than you did.
I agree with that, certainly. I think there's a part of me, and obviously last weekend just made how valuable Jordan is very, very clear to everyone. And you've heard that a lot, and people that have said that are certainly accurate. There's a part of me that really would have liked to have seen what it would have just looked like, even if you could have had Gibbons and Bavion. And I'm not trying to make those guys into something that they're not, but Bavion's a pretty decent guard, in my opinion, and Gibbons has been impressive, both in his level of play and the toughness that he's displayed, and going out there at times where it was questionable. So obviously, if those guys aren't playing, there's a reason. And with all due respect to Love Taylor, a good player last year and a shell of what he was last year. Now it's just when you have Scott and Taylor starting at this point, really hard to do anything. And it was impressive to me how close the game was. Now, I do think that NC State helped you there. This is not me trying to do my own instant reaction podcast, but, man, I was blown away by how frequently NC State's offense just tried to establish a running game for reasons that I have no clear idea as to what they were doing. I put down in my own personal notes that if you tell NC State staff that they can only throw the ball 5 times in this game, I think they beat Florida State by 30. I mean,
run it 5 times.
I'm sorry, run it. If they can only run it 5 times in the game, I think they beat Florida State by 30 points. I have some real questions as to what they were trying to do there and why, but ultimately
they could have easily thrown for 500 yards, easily, if they wanted to.
Yeah, it was that part of it was a bit of a mystery to me, and glad that it transpired, but I know there's a whole lot of conversation about fourth down decisions and stuff like that, and we can talk on that. I don't want to really get lost in the minutia of it. I think to an extent, the fact that you can even sit here and debate a fourth down decision made in the third quarter is a bit of a minor miracle. When we talk about the parts that you don't have, and the flu that made its way through both the football team and the broader community, but if anything, I don't know, bud. I don't want to be reactionary guy, but if anything, I would be critical of Mike Norvell for not going for it more. And I know there's people that don't want to hear that. I know there's people that look, the 4th and 4. If you in your heart of hearts think you should have punted that ball, well, I get it. I don't want to say I agree with you, but I understand where you're coming from. But on the whole, when you're dealing with that quarterback and that offensive line, and a defense who got some stops, but wasn't really going to stop them, particularly if they ever woke up to the ball that they could throw the ball whenever they wanted to. I'm not going to fault coaching staff for being as aggressive as possible in that situation.
Yeah, and look, So I want to go through this just slightly because I have the post game numbers for all the fourth downs now. There is an argument to be made that, hey, you would stop them on the previous two drives. I think as a coaching staff, it is somewhat negligent to value the extremely small sample set that is the last two drives over like what you know about your defense for the entire season or even for the entirety of the whole game, right? I think that's fairly important there to consider. Like, yes, you stopped on the last two drives. Is there real reason to think that's going to continue going forward? That's a sample set of two. They can make adjustments as well and have throughout the game. You also have really struggled to move the ball, and you had the ball in position, right? To like you're at midfield. That's a lot more. That's better than your average starting field position on the day by quite a bit. And the goal is to win, not to lose close, not to tie.
Well,
Remember,
and you
playing for
you
a
had
tie
found
gets you
something.
overtime.
Yeah, and you had found something with what I will deem the varsity blues offense there. I mean, yeah, and it is. You found something with 3-on-1 and one on the other side, and both dictating a matchup and kind of getting your defensive counterpart to somewhat tip his hand as to what he's in. Again, I don't want to belabor the point. I just think it's if you're going to sit here and argue about that with a guy for 15 minutes or so, you need to acknowledge that the fact that you were even in that situation is fairly remarkable and fairly fortunate. I mean, I want to give the coaching staff credit for what they did, and I'm not trying to wash over that. But I like you said earlier, I think if you play this game 10 times, NC State probably wins 9 of them, and the average margin of victory is probably in the high teens, if not the 20s. I just think you were a bit fortunate to have the result that you did.
So you need to like the goal is not to hold on, right? There's like a poker analogy, right? You have to understand when your opportunity is to go and win the game. And if it makes you sad that sometimes the opportunity to go and win the game is with like 12 minutes left, and if you don't get it, the game is probably over. Okay. You have to understand when the actual opportunity is to win the game, right? Hey, I'm catching a little bit of feedback. It may be my AirPods or is your volume on your headphones loud? Like
I'm
your mic?
not. I'm not having
Okay,
any audio
cool. If
issues
you're not having any
currently.
feedback, then that's cool. Um, so I want to go through a couple things here because people are like, "Hey, don't they realize they have Mackenzie Milton in the game, and doesn't that affect their chart?" But Norvell addressed this yesterday. He said, "Look, we use like common sense and understanding what is going on with the field." Um, yeah, I'm not hearing it anymore. So I think your mic was picking up, probably through your headphones, if I had to guess. So Mike talked about this. Like they do use a chart, and I guarantee you they modify their game book for the situations of the game because I know what the one I have access to looks like, and theirs is more expensive and more customizable than mine. And I guarantee you there says, hey, how many points have you scored? How many yards do you have so far in this game? What was the over under for the game? Which is basically like, hey, based on what we know about these two defenses and offenses, how many points did you really expect to score in this game? You know what I mean? And how many points do you think you're going to need to score now? Uh, at the time, they had scored what 14. The opponent had scored 21, I think, and it was a clear go. However, there were a couple other situations in this game that were also clear goes, and they did not go for them. Now, they're clear goes by my book. Here's where I'm going to tell you I think that these are the Mackenzie Milton adjustments, meaning they realized their offense was going to suck, probably, and didn't go for it. They were trying to gamble by punting. And in this case, under normal circumstances, the punt was the gamble, okay? The go for it was the safe move. I know that's kind of like a thing. It's like people, going for it's a gamble. Not really. Punting the possession away is the gamble in these situations. So normally, I think Mike would have gone in the first quarter on his own 34, 4th and 1. Right, they're down 7. That's a common move for him. 4th and 1 is an auto go a lot of the time, and it should be because you're very very likely to get 4th and 1. They punted it. Okay, now You might tell me that's because of McKenzie. You might tell me that's because they didn't really know what they had in this offense in the first quarter, coming off of like a week of kind of wasted practice because of everybody being out with the flu. And I think it's a fair, like that is a coach going against the book or what the book normally tells you to do because of the uncertainty that is difficult to model based on like not having practice, right?
Yeah, it's also trying to avoid getting knocked out in the first
Yeah,
15 minutes of a game or something like
I
that.
think
But
so.
yeah,
All right, next one. 10 minutes left in the first quarter. 4th and 1 again from their 39. That's a clear go. If you look at the win probability change, punting there decreases your win probability by 4.5%. It was actually the most impactful decision of the game, 4th down wise. Mike punted it. So if you're keeping score here, -0.7 for the first one, -4.5 for the next one. Mike's 2 punt decisions cut down their win probability, according to the normal book, by 5.2% total. Now, I think you can make a real argument that Mike's using a little more common sense than just the straight book and saying, hey, we have McKenzie Milton. We don't know what we have in this offense. We didn't really get to practice this week, not much collectively. Let's go ahead and kind of get a feel for what we have. Okay. The next two, he obviously goes for. I don't hear a whole lot of people bitching about this one. So they're down 14-0. He's at his own 34, 4th and 1. He goes, Jay Sean picks it up. Did you hear complaining about that one? No, because people are complaining about the result, not the decision, ultimately, is what we normally see. When you go for it on 4th down and you get it, you're a genius. When you go for it on 4th down and you don't get it, you're a dumbass. And then you get somebody with a YouTube show all drunk after the game ranting about it, right? So, but I didn't hear anything on other people's Twitter feeds about the 4th downs they went for. How about this one? 4th down, got to go for it. Oh, but you could kick a field goal to cut the 21-10. No, they go for it there, and they get it. All right. The next one actually is the one I think you'd probably have the biggest gripe with. So it's 21-14. There's 14 minutes left in the game. Ball on your own 35, 4th-and-1. They punt it. Model says that's the wrong decision. Model says you need to go for that. It's -2.2. Okay, that's a clear go. Mike still punted it. Now, let's look at the one that he went for that everybody was all pissed off about. 4th-and-4, but it's not from your own 30-something, right? It's from your own 43. There's 8 minutes left in the game, 14-21. You're trying to win the game. This is the other thing I want to point out about this, and then I'll be done with my little rant here. A lot of people have this mindset of, hey, if you punt it away, you could still tie the game. Tying the game only gets you to overtime, where you probably have a 40% chance to win, maybe.
if that.
Take your probability of tying it up if you punt, right, which is whatever it is, and then multiply that by 0.4, because again, the goal is to win, not to just extend the game. You want to win it. Extending the game helps the better team because over a larger sample set, they're going to do better. You want to have the smaller sample set. You want to have these things go in your favor. So anyway, and then obviously when they were down when they were down 2 scores, 4th-and-10 from your own 75, he punts. That's clearly a move of we're not scoring. We're trying to not get blown out. At that point, the model says to go for it. It's a very, very, very small, sample there, or excuse me, very small difference between going for it and not going for it on 4th-and-10, down 2 scores at that point. Basically, the model says your chance to win the game is essentially done, right? So to recap this, there were how many situations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There were 8 situations in which the model said to go for it, right? This is the model I think FSU uses normally without the McKenzie Milton adjustments. Mike only went for 4 of them. He's definitely not being and first of all, I think punting is actually the aggressive move. Going against the numbers it's hey, not doubling down when you should in blackjack, right? That's an aggressive move. It's kind of a dumb move. Could work out for you. In the long term, probably not. But for the people that are saying that he's too quote unquote aggressive, and I know what they mean. I think they're misusing the term aggressive, but that he's going for way too many 4th downs, I totally disagree. Like in this situation, he's clearly showing the ability to read the game state, apply internal factors and knowledge, and incorporate elements that are happening in the game to make what he thinks is the best decision there. 4 of 8 is not like this guy's not following the book all the time. I guarantee you that.
Certainly not. That is good perspective, and I appreciate you bringing it to our audience. It does give you a much more broader look at the picture, and a guy who's very easily to tag aggressive on these fourth down decisions or whatever else. Gives you a little bit idea as to some of the other decisions that were made, and I think correctly some of the decisions that were altered because of who your quarterback and other personnel are or were. Um, it's not breaking news that the wide receivers are not very good, but I mean, I know that's something that we and everybody else has talked about the team as detailed and in perspective or in ad infinitum. I got to say something on Saturday. It was special how bad that unit was. I don't know that I've ever seen this. I'm not positive of this, but when I go back and look at this tape in detail, I'm pretty sure Florida State's trying to run a decent amount of kind of rub slash pick concepts,
Oh yeah,
and your wide receivers can't even get off the line of scrimmage because they're getting bullied so badly. I mean, I don't. Again, I don't pay attention to other people's wide receivers as closely as I do Florida State, but I've watched an awful lot of college football in my 37 years of walking around on this planet, and I don't think I've ever seen a unit that can't even get out and run some of the simple pick concepts that you're trying to do offensively. I mean, in a second, let's talk about whether or not Florida State's recruiting their way out of this, because you certainly have to. It's become painfully obvious as to some of the talent deficiencies that are on this roster. But what I saw out of those wide receivers on Saturday is a tough pill to swallow. And I think some of that's on coaching, but a lot of it is on guys that just don't have the physical ability to be playing wide receiver for Florida State, and it's almost unfair of what you're asking them to do or to be overly critical of them. But it is a exceptionally disappointing unit.
I totally agree. There are a couple really depressing elements in this game. Um, like you mentioned, their inability to run just like flat out pick routes at some point because they're getting jammed so hard. Like if you look at it, like the slot just gets pressed back into the X. That's pretty amazing. I don't know that they converted any third or fourth downs against man coverage. Uh, there was, and I will note this, like, okay, a couple things to explain here. Number one, we knew going into the game typically that FSU was a bad team against man coverage. That is pretty clear. I don't have the pregame numbers, but I do have the numbers updated postgame, and I will tell you that FSU is 110th in yards per pass attempt against man coverage, and they are 57th in yards per pass attempt against zone. Now, look, 57th isn't great, but 57th is kind of about what this team is, right? Like if you tell me it's a top 40 team in the country, you tell me it's like a top 60 team in the country, I'm right there with you. Sure, that's about right. Like they're clearly to me a top half team in the nation based on how they've played. Maybe not their record, but like the quality of play relative to the quality of opponent. NC State in this game, they played a lot of man early. FSU was not able to beat it for the most part. Then FSU did some creative stuff, I thought, to get to, I don't say trick, but like they kind of forced NC State to play some zone looks. This lasted for a little bit. Then at a certain point, and it was about like a 10-minute stretch in the third quarter, I think, if I recall from the rewatch. I think NC State just said, screw it. We know it is not smart for us to play man against some of these looks that we should schematically play zone against. And we don't care. Right? You know that meme you probably see on Instagram, the guy with the good voice. We don't care. We're going to play man against these looks that the book says we should play zone against, because we don't think you could do a damn thing against these man-to-man looks. And they were right. I mean, that was tough. Jordan Travis makes this offense go right now, and teams do not want to play that much man against him because they're turning their back and his scrambling ability
Right.
is so damn good. We also saw the continued impact, and we got some blowback in the last YouTube video for the preview, literally, when you and I said, without Jordan Travis in there, teams aren't really all that scared of these backs. And somebody hit us with some of the Jacksonville State stats. I was like, okay, well, thanks for playing. In this game, you saw it again.
To be fair to the backs, I would have loved to have seen what they could have done with the two guards.
That's the other point, for sure.
That's the thing that really does hurt, and you just can't get anything going in the first half of a running game. It was, again, in a game that wasn't short on embarrassments. It was frustrating to see how ineffective the run was, particularly without both Jordan and without Gibbons or healthy Love Taylor or Bavion. Again, I don't want to make too much out of Bavion, but if you go back and look at the UNC game rather than the NC State game, guy's a pretty effective run blocker. He's pretty good, big frame, strong, decent hands. Again, I'm not making it out as though he's drive blocking some 5 yards back into the backers or something like that, but pretty effective at just controlling a defensive lineman, kind of turning him and creating a little bit of a run lane. Hopefully, those are two guys that could be back for this weekend, and obviously, we'll have a full and detailed Miami preview to come later in the week. But big loss without having your two guards there as well.
They need to get at least one of those guys back. That's for sure problematic. I mean, I don't want to jump into the Miami preview now, but it'll be interesting. Miami plays a whole lot of man coverage, so they're gonna have to find a way to beat that. Miami is actually 18th in percentage of man coverage played, which is more than NC State normally does. So Miami's playing a lot of man. The difference is Miami is not as good at man coverage as NC State is. Like, they played a lot, but their defense is not as good as NC State's, and certainly not as good as Clemson's defense was. So you asked if they are recruiting their way out of the receiver problem. I think it's TBD. If you bring in Destin Hill and Mortimer, then I think that's a nice step in the right direction. Personally, Mortimer's having a really nice year and gives you a speed element that I don't think you really have on this offense. Destin Hill, we haven't seen play in a year, so I'm not going to tell you that he's an instant impact guy. I think that's kind of irresponsible to guarantee that. But, I mean, his high school stuff was pretty damn nice. And assuming they get him in the spring, and that's what the staff's planning on, from what I've been told, he could certainly help you, and then they will need to hit the portal again. And we already had the, hey, if you're a receiver, why are you going to come to FSU in the portal conversation? I think 2 episodes ago, because they really don't have much proof concept throwing football right now.
I would show him this tape, though. I would show him wide receivers that just physically are manhandled, and maybe that has something to do with your leading wide receiver having 16 catches on the year or whatever it is at this point. Frustrating conversation about the NC State game in general. One small piece of good news that we got out of North Carolina recently. Greg and Suzanne want to congratulate them. I believe these are our first North Carolina buyers since our good friends Shannon and Chad opened up that space, so to say. So again, whether you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, there are no better people to work with. Shannon is one of the bigger go-getters that I've encountered in my life. He'll respond to you with a quickness, and as my co-host can attest to, is literally an expert in the field, and an expert in the field that I think at this point only handles Nolecast leads. So you get to work with Chad and Shannon, and you get to work with a guy who's not only thorough and quick, but is a senior producer and is going to be able to guide you through the process with experience that others may not be able to offer.
You get to speak with the manager, basically. Like he's managing stuff, and then he keeps all the Nolecast leads as his side gig. Yeah, that you don't get Shannon otherwise. It's like a special, like, do you know the extension? Otherwise, you got to go through the phone tree. Everybody knows the extension 844 FSU loan. Where do you want to go now?
I don't want to completely leave recruiting because I do want to. We touched at the position, but obviously that's a theme that can apply to the entirety of the roster. Wide receiver may be a particular tough pill to swallow when it comes to looking at what you really have here, but it's a problem overall. And I mean, I don't think anybody is seriously, absent maybe 9 o'clock at night after you've had a couple bourbons after a disappointing loss on Saturday. I don't think anybody's really sitting there talking about moving on from this coaching staff at this point in time. I do want to point out that if they sign this class, and I don't think it's going to be a top 10 class, I think it'll land probably somewhere between 13 and 16, 13 and 17, that it will almost be unprecedented as to the level of success that they had on the recruiting trail when compared to the level of success on the field. So you have to give them credit. Obviously, there's some, there's a friendly bounce or two out there when it comes to like having a kid like Travis Hunter that just loves Florida State in a manner that honestly is probably more than some of our listeners do. And you lucked out there, but still, you got to give credit to this staff if they're ultimately able to have keep this class together and have success. That they will have done something that really there's not a whole lot of historical precedent to.
All right, so let's go ahead and run a query here on recruiting classes in the early signing period era. So that is 2018 to present. You said 13 to 17, right?
Somewhere in that area.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and go 17th or better, so that I don't miss anything that's like a true outlier. Okay, I'm going to put in head coach seasons at school, minimum 2, right? Ingram, and wins before the bowl game. What do you want to say here? 3 or 4 or fewer to account for them maybe winning one more game?
Yeah.
Okay. Results not found.
It's a quick search.
Yeah. It's results not found. We have seen a 4-win team sign a top 15 class before one time, and that was the Mullen class coming off the McElwain disaster. But his head coach seasons at the school were 0.
Mm-hmm.
So that was basically just maybe holding class together. And ultimately, what we saw with that class is that it sucks. Like, it's part of the reason why Mullen, not all of it, but part of the reason why Mullen is struggling there in Gainesville right now. The point of this is that clearly what Mike and his guys are doing right now on the recruiting trail, relative to the record, is unprecedented. I don't let me look here. South Carolina in the 2019 class, so that would have been, okay, so Muschamp was still there. They went 4-8, and they signed the number 19 class. That was after his 4th season at the school. It's actually fairly impressive to go 4-8 after 4 years, clearly be on the hot seat, and then still sign that, right? Anyway, what Mike is doing here is unprecedented. What FSU needs right now are a couple things: stability, some talent development and teaching, to the extent you think the current guys on this roster are going to be around when the next good team comes along, which I think some of them will, but my thoughts on this are pretty well known. I don't think they're going to be a good team next year. I think you need to be looking 23, 24 because of the long-term nature of this rebuild, because of decisions you made, not necessarily wrong ones, but ones we've gone over this a lot of times. If you're a new, but it's everybody's podcast is somebody's first, right? I think we've been pretty clear on this. You can't coach after just 2 years in the early signing period, following a time when your previous coach wasn't really recruiting in 2017, and you have a lot of cultural issues that you got to clean up too. It's going to take time. It just is. You got to recruit your way out of this, and hopefully you bring those recruits into a culture that you're happy with. I think they're pretty happy with their culture overall right now. I'm not saying everybody on this roster they love, but I think that is trending in the right direction. You get a little talent infusion. You back it up with another solid class the next year. And if you have a really nice year on the field in 2023, maybe you can bring in some like real difference makers in that class, right? So that's kind of the path to return to it. And again, you'd be a moron to axe a guy, which they won't do. Pretty much guarantee you this, unless Mike goes out and kills somebody with an axe, and then obviously like that, then you would axe him.
Have to be something that transpired off the football field at this point,
right?
And an axe murder would qualify.
Right. I just had axe in my head, right?
That would probably do it. All right. So, yeah, well, obviously, recruiting is going to be a massive point of focus for both this podcast and this program. And we're fortunate enough to be able to lean on Bud's experience as a national recruiting advisor. And we'll look forward to bringing you as much information as possible. And it's a fun period of time, and it's a fun time as a fan base to be able to look at closing out a top 10, 15, 20 class. We'll see where it lands, but that is certainly the beacon of optimism that we all hope continues to burn bright. So we'll thank our friends at Congruity. Fantastic partnership for us, and we would think would be a great partnership for you and your business, whether it be help with payroll or HR solutions. Congruity is designed to do nothing but enhance your brand, save time, save money, and reduce your risk as a business. Again, we think the world of Matt Lewis and his team, and we think that it would be nothing but of a benefit for you and your business to spend 10 minutes to explore whether or not the partnership that exists with us and Matt could exist with you. So congruityhr.com is the website. Phone number is 844 247 4100. And as always, if you feel more comfortable reaching out to me directly to create a more informal setting or meeting for you guys, feel free to do so. But thanks again, as always, to our friends at Congruity.
All right. What do you want to get into now? We have some. Did you see a couple coaching decisions I thought maybe we should get into ever so briefly, to steal your term? Florida made some coaching moves, and so did Nebraska. Nebraska this year, let's put aside some of the coaching decisions Scott Frost made against Ohio State, because I thought that was kind of egregious. But Nebraska is an interesting case. They made a coaching change just right before the early signing period in 2018, much like FSU did. Their 2018 class was fairly highly ranked. They are getting nothing from it, much like FSU is not getting anything from its 2018 class, nor not a whole lot from its 2020 class, which is another transition class. Nebraska, though, has shown improvement, much like FSU has. Obviously, FSU's made less improvement, less timeline as well. Nebraska this year, quality of play-wise, if you look at it, FEI or SP+, they're 24th, and their record is 3-7. I think
tough.
this is a smart thing, though, that their AD did to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and keep this guy, despite the fact that we're going 3-7. It's frustrating to watch this team not be able to pull off these wins. Much like FSU, Nebraska has played a difficult schedule. Nebraska's a better team than FSU. I think Nebraska will be favored by, I don't know, about a touchdown, I would guess. This is an administration looking under the hood as opposed to just at the record. And the record matters. It does. It should, because fans aren't going to look under the hood. But if you're making a $50 million decision, which all told when you fire the coach and the staff and you got to go hire the new guy and all the different changes that come with that, you better be looking at more than just record. You better be looking under the hood. That's what FSU did when it fired Willie, right? It wasn't just the record. Now, some of the reasons given, obviously, were record-based. Did you pause or freeze? Okay, no, you're there. Cool. You're very stoic for a second, bro. I think Nebraska's going to set the record for like the most expected wins minus actual wins, because they should be 6-4, and instead they're 3-7. But they're playing at a high level. Now, he did make some offensive changes there. Anyway, I just think it's encouraging that more ADs are looking probably more at the quality of play metrics than they are just purely the record, or at least using that as a piece of their puzzle when they're making these decisions. Florida, meanwhile, I thought Mullen was a good fit for Florida when they hired him. He obviously has had very good results on the whole at UF. But a couple things when they hired him, we said, we'll see how he recruits, right? He recruited well for Mississippi State standards at Mississippi State. Could he translate that and do better when he put on the Gators polo? The logo matters. It is not really translated enough, certainly. He has not taken advantage of the recruiting that you should be able to take advantage of in this state with FSU and Miami being so down. We saw Bowden do this when Spurrier wasn't really in on recruiting a little bit more in the late 90s before he went to Washington. And, obviously Miami was having some transition stuff off sanctions. We saw Urban Meyer do this when you had very late stage, or not late stage, late career Bowden and like Larry Coker / Randy Shannon there in Miami. You also saw Miami take advantage of this some at different parts. So Mullins kind of missed that window to really clean up in recruiting in the state. And I think it was a very tough decision he had to make. I mean, he fired a guy who has been his offensive line coach. You know how these offensive coordinators are with their offensive line coach of choice. And I think Hevesy is a good coaching coach. Not a great recruiter, obviously. But he's been with Dan Mullen since Bowling Green in 2001.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's a 20-year, like, hey, we're in each other's weddings type,
right.
Type move. So he fired him, and he fired Todd Grantham. I'm a little surprised Florida didn't just rip the Band-Aid there after that loss, because I think Mullen is a good X's and O's coach. But if you lose like that, and that to me was the first loss that Florida took, I will say, in which I felt like they were like legitimately dominated. The Kentucky loss was very fluky. The LSU loss, they gave up some rushing yards, but they also had 3 turnovers returned, if not for touchdowns, like very deep in their own territory. They played Bama to a 2-point conversion. Down-to-down basis, they were pretty much fine against Georgia until some crazy turnover stuff happened. South Carolina whipped that ass.
Yeah.
And that to me is a team that kind of quit. And I know they had flu as well, like FSU did, so we should give them that break, obviously. And if they had flu later in the week, it probably affected them more. I know Mullins said they had a bunch of guys on IVs and how they had to fly them separately. We'll see. I just thought that was interesting.
Significant. I agree. Interesting. Also, very rare that you get a head coach to part with a coordinator and a longtime position coach, and there's not an implication that he's coming back next year. Now, if they take a goose egg or Florida State wins by 21 in the swamp or something like that, I'm not dismissing that this story can't be circled back to, but the general playbook is when you get concessions like that made, you are allowing for another year of the head coach. So something to look for. And this is not me thumping my chest, but I've talked about it since the beginning of the season. It's just something strange going on in Gainesville, and it seems to have kind of a couple of tough losses from the standpoint of how well they played, and they ended up losing, and then one strange blowout in South Carolina has kind of brought everything to light, seemingly. So we'll have to see, and Florida State certainly doesn't have its own problems, but never a bad time as a Florida State fan to sit there and enjoy some of the challenges that are going on in Gainesville right now. But I think we'll probably have to hold the listener questions to the Miami preview. We'll put together a longer, more comprehensive pod there, but we did just want to get something out to you here this morning. Credit to Bud. This was early for both of us, but Bud's Central Time, so it's even earlier for him to make this work. Appreciate you doing it, and I know our listeners enjoy being able to have something available for them on Tuesday morning. So from myself, from Bud, everybody else involved in the podcast, we certainly thank you. We ask that you keep our friends Madison Social and Township in mind if you're going to the game this weekend and visit them and enjoy the great services that they offer. But from the two of us, this has been a Nolecast, and we'll be back to talk to you in the next couple days for a full Miami preview.